Hello there, and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp. I'm the inventor of gold leaf, as it's known in the US, or liquid gold here in the UK, plus many, many other products used in hydroponics, sports turf, and arable. But that's enough blowing my own trumpet. Do you know the difference between seed vigor and seed viability? Two very important variables. If you don't know the difference, don't worry. That's what this podcast is going to go into. If you're more of a beginner, I suggest you look at some of the earlier episodes of Hydroponics Daily. And I found out today that Apple Podcast only show the last 100 episodes. So if you go on to Podbean and look for Hydroponics Daily Podbean, that's where we host the podcast. And there you'll find all of the podcast episodes running back to January the 1st of this year. I've done one every day of 2025. And hopefully every day of 2025, I will be doing an episode. That was my New Year's resolution, and I've stuck to it. And it's now the 4th of July. So we've got most of the way through the year. Happy 4th of July to everyone in the United States of America. Have some Boston tea on us limeys over here. We won't be taxing you too hard, metaphorically or literally, in today's episode. It's just seed vigor and seed viability. Often these are used interchangeably, but they are completely different. So the terms sound similar, but they describe very different qualities. So let's get into it. Seed viability refers to whether a seed is alive and capable of germination under optimal conditions. It's a yes-no status. Can this seed sprout if everything is perfect? Now, a seed can be viable and you still might not be able to germinate it. That's up to your skill. But the seed viability is predetermined and depends on how you store it. Seed vigor is very different, and that's about how well the seed performs once you've germinated it, how fast it grows, how uniformly it germinates, how strong it is, and how does it establish in less than ideal conditions. Think amount of plant, stress resistance, emergence strength, root development. These are all vigor. Okay, so you want it to be viable and vigorous when you buy seeds. So imagine two batches of basil seeds may both be 95% viable, but one with higher vigor will produce more consistent, faster germinating seeds. Crucial in an automated hydroponic system where days to harvest is absolutely critical. So the reason I'm doing this episode now is because I have purchased some seeds off the internet, and they were a rare strain, a completely different species that's normally grown. And so they were in the seed bank, and they said, we assure certain amounts of viability. And sure enough, the seeds were viable. And this species you can store for many, many years and they still be viable. However, so about 80% germinated, but the problem was they had terrible vigor. And one of them got mildew straight out of the bat, which is not great. So there must have been some mildew spores in there, or grey mold or something like that. It was covered in fungal growth anyway. And then about 6 of them just keeled over and died at the slightest inconvenience. And then only one of them survived. And even that wanted to die at every opportunity. And really was trying to get me to put it out of its misery. Slightly too much. I gave them all a dose of salicylic acid to try and boost them, and it just went, no, and scorched the leaves. Whereas all my other plants that I was growing with different varieties and strains, they were growing perfectly well, and they just loved the salicylic acid. So the vigor was terrible. And the reason why, I think, is because you've got to remember, when any organism is growing, the cells are repairing themselves. If they get mutated, the genome can repair itself, and the damage to the cell structures can repair itself. Seeds are dormant, and so they're not cells actively dividing, they're not growing, so they're not actively repairing themselves, they're not metabolizing. So any ionizing radiation like gamma rays, X-rays, any sort of radiation coming in would be mutating that. And also mutations happen due to chemicals and just through time. So these seeds have clearly just lost their vigor. Now, the plants are starting to recover, and the bigger they get, I think the cells are starting to repair themselves. And hopefully, if I can get seeds off this plant, I can renew them, and the seeds will certainly not be as damaged, and I can select the healthiest plants from them. So I had whereas before I bought seeds, and none of them have germinated. And clearly this wasn't a vigor issue, this was a viability issue. So seed quality is determined by both of those things. Whereas seed companies, when you're buying seeds off the internet, they normally only ever guarantee viability. So watch out for that. You might want to ask how long have those seeds been stored for, because that's going to be critical about how healthy they get. But then sometimes you might be looking for mutants anyway. Lots of people look for novel, interesting phenotypes and genotypes, and they're looking for unusual growth types. And so you might want old seeds for that purpose. The Chinese send pumpkin seeds up into space to get them mutated because they believe that the mutants can grow better than the wild types. So, yeah, I don't know any hydroponic growers that are sending their seeds into space. You could get one of those balloons that, put like webcams into near space, or you could expose them to if you had a good source of radioactive waste near you could put some seeds near there, So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, if you're in the Eastern Europe, if you're in Ukraine, Belarus, put some seeds in the Chernobyl exclusion zones, see if they grow more interesting. However, if you're growing something like basil, lettuce, coriander, you want absolutely rapid vigor. So lettuce, basil, and coriander, they can decline rapidly in storage. Tomatoes and peppers are renowned for their good storage over years, many decades. Tomatoes can last decades in storage. Rocket and arugula, is that coriander in the UK? Notorious for fast vigor loss, even in good storage. So that's something to consider. How to store seeds how storage conditions affect seed viability and vigor. The three main enemies are heat, humidity, and oxygen. So seed longevity is maximized, both the vigor and the viability, by keeping them cold, ideally between 1 and 10 degrees Celsius if you're an amateur grower. So that's refrigerator. You can do frozen storage, but you do need to look into that because there's a lot that goes into it. You need to keep them dry, around 30 to 40% humidity, dark place, sealed containers. Oxygen exposure increases respiration. And one rule of thumb for all you Americans on the 4th of July, the sum of temperature in Fahrenheit and relative humidity in percentage should be less than 100. That doesn't really work in metric, does it? In Celsius or Kelvin. So yeah, keep that one to, just for America, that one. I don't know what it would be in Celsius. Maybe that someone can work that one out and come up with a handy tool for seed storage. So how can if you have poor viability and germination, uniformity and timing, low vigor causes uneven germination, poor tray performance in things like microgreens, delayed growth, so you could get bottlenecks in rotation systems. Say you have a mother room where you just germinate seeds. A germination room, sorry. Have you grown, say, autoflowers, autoflowering species? You could have a seed germination room and then a vegetative veg room and then a flowering room. This could, if you had seeds that were low vigor, this could really upset how long it takes to run through all these different rooms. Weak roots, you're going to have transplant shock, nutrient issues, damage, and things like this, and pest and disease that could get in through the root system. And your yields will be far lower than, the full potential of a healthy wild type plant. So especially critical in automated NFT, RAF systems and commercial microgreen growers. In NFT, you're going to get things like algae growing away quicker than you can control them. And then in an already weakened root system, use of peroxides and things like this will damage the root system. Even worse in a low vigor, low health plant. So how can you test for viability and vigor? So for viability, it's just a germination test. Place 100 seeds if you've got them. Obviously, you can't do that if they're a very valuable seed or a rare one. But things like wheat, They place 100 seeds on moist paper in a warm place and count how many sprout in 5 to 10 days. That's a good test of viability, how many can germinate. You can also cut the seed in half and stain them with a dye that only turns red if the seed is alive. However, it's a bit more technical. Best to just do a germination test. I've forgotten what the name of that chemical is. It's a pink dye. Let me pause this and see if I can find it. Okay. Tetrazolium. Of course it is, Russell. Tetrazolium, that's the pink dye. You can cut a seed open, see if it's viable are the cells alive in there. So that will say whether it can germinate, not whether you've got the skills to get it to germinate. And for Vigour, there's a couple of tests you can do. You could do a cold test, soak seeds and germinate them at 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Slow and uneven emergence in those slightly stressful conditions will suggest low vigor. And you could do an accelerated aging test, expose the seeds to high humidity and temperature for 3 to 5 days, then test their germination. So that's how you could test them. So yeah, interesting that you can test for both. So how can you prevent low viability and low vigor? Well, always buy your seeds from a reputable supplier. Ask them how long they've been in storage. That would be crucial for vigor. Label all seed containers with the date and crop lots that they were harvested at. If you're storing your own seeds, store the seeds in optimal conditions, so low temperature, low humidity, and low oxygen. Avoid bulk buying sensitive crops unless you can store them properly. Use older seeds for non-critical runs or trials, and use new seeds for high-value crops and high-value situations. And consider priming or pelleting for uniformity. These are more common in Asia. You get pelleted seeds. I think it does involve plastic polymers as well, so a lot of people would want to avoid pelleting. Priming involves giving them a treatment that will sort of get them halfway to germination first, or it could mean like seed coating them with a chemical that promotes germination. On the Utrema website, there is a blog post that talks about the chemicals that you can apply to seeds to improve their germination. There's about a list of about 30 that I put together from various scientific papers. It's one of our most read web pages on our website. So if you just go onto the blog section of Utrema and type seed germination, that will come up, and you can look at all the different chemicals that do that. Things like nitrates, all the hormones, things like that. If you're struggling to find Utrema, it's just the Latin word for wasabi. eutrema.co.uk. Very popular webpage. That for some reason, loads of people go onto that every day. A few facts about seeds to wrap it up before we go. Some seeds can last decades. Lotus seeds over 1,000 years old have been germinated. Loads of seeds in the British Museum, I think, or the Natural History Museum when there was a bomb in the Second World War, been stored for centuries, germinated. One of the bombs hit and it was raining and all the seeds germinated. Pelleted seeds may look fancy, but they're more sensitive to moisture and time, apparently. But as I say, they're more common in, like when you buy I bought a lot of brassica cabbage seeds from Korea, and they all came in fancy coloured pellets. Older seeds sometimes produce mutations or uneven phenotypes, especially in hybrids. That's something that you might be looking forward to. So the journey from seed to harvest starts long before the roots hit water. Understanding vigor, viability and storage is key to planning efficiency, reliable hydroponic productions. And remember, strong seeds equals strong systems. So if you are looking for strong plants, always check how long they've been stored. And you might want to choose a different variety or strain if they've been stored for a long time, even if they are, much sought out after genetics. The good news is that if you're using a fertilizer like Gold Leaf or Liquid Gold, it's got a very low electrical conductivity. So it will help when seeds are germinating. They won't have to struggle to get water in. And you can go from seed to harvest of your crop with just that one input and water. You don't need grow media necessarily. You don't need to add anything else. CalMags, pH ups, pH downs, dechlorinators, pK boosts. You can go the whole way with just that one bottle of Gold Leaf, or in the UK, Liquid Gold. If you want any questions or any more information, then you know where to find me at eutrema.co.uk. So if you'd like to know anything else, or you think I've got anything wrong, then please do email me. Love to talk to people who've listened to the podcast. We've had a few emails in from people who've appreciated listening and have asked for advice. Even people asking for advice on other people's products, other people's fertilizer. And I'm more than happy to do that. I just like talking to people about growing plants because I'm a plant nerd, for want of a better word. Right, I am off. and going to go and watch some television. Boring night tonight. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. It's the weekend. It's a freaking weekend. Have some fun. Goodbye.